Enrollment Rx's webinar series on reaching new heights on Salesforce for admissions. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Lawrence Levy. I'm the president of Enrollment Rx. I'm pleased to join by my colleague, Mark Farrell.
Good morning, everybody.
Thanks again for joining us. Today's topic is on how to create an applicant portal on Salesforce for admissions. And we're going to be talking about how Enrollment Rx uses our product called Form Builder Rx to really transform Salesforce's Experience Cloud into that applicant portal environment that our colleges are seeking. So we're going to talk about the different types of applicant portals and the different types of requirements that we really service. But that's what we're going to be speaking about today, how we use Form Builder Rx, which is available on Salesforce's App Exchange, to transform Experience Cloud into that applicant portal environment that's very easy to create, very composable, as we say, really empowering for the operations teams, in our case, those director of admissions and those other operations folks, to control the applicant portal experience and control everything that they would like an applicant to be able to see and do when they are applying to your institution. So with that, there's a few agenda items that we're going to be covering today. We're going to be talking about the applicant portal from a traditional sense, talking about traditional programs, those undergraduate or graduate applicants that are applying through those traditional types of experiences. What does that need to include and contain and support? And then we're going to talk about non-traditional programs and the differences therein, and what are the complexities that we have to account for in those kinds of experiences. And then we are going to talk about solution composability and how we're able to deploy those kinds of things without writing code and without employing an army of software developers, and really with mouse clicks being able to create and modify and update and control those types of applicant portal environments. So those are the agenda items that we'd like to cover today. So just to begin the conversation, right? Obviously, there are many types of applicants that higher education needs to support, whether it's undergraduate or graduate applicants or non-traditional applicants, as we've said, or domestic or international, or all types. So really, one of the questions that we ask higher education is, why is it that when applicants might come to a college's or university's website, they might see a link to click here to apply to undergrad, or click here to apply to grad, or click here to apply if you're an international student? Why does the school actually need three separate links? And the short answer to that question is because there's likely three separate systems that are supporting those three separate applicant portal experiences or application requirements. And so we want to have that magical system that really has that one button of click here to apply. And then if I'm an undergraduate applicant versus a graduate applicant versus a non-traditional international applicant, everything that I can see and do within that one portal experience should be dynamic, should change, should really render information and content that personalized based on the rules and logic that are important to my institution. And if those rules and logic should need to change, then again, we're going to talk about what that means from a solution composability perspective and what that would require in order to make those changes. But as we said, we want to start first talking about the real basics of what are traditional program requirements in an applicant portal experience, whether it's undergraduate or graduate. These are the types of things that our clients are asking us to support. So, Mark, of course, you're very familiar with this, and we are often asked by colleges and universities, whether it's for undergrad or grad, they want us to deliver them that applicant portal experience where an applicant might be able to click to apply, log into a portal environment, and then again, depending on what type of applicant they are, they need to be able to see things like their admissions requirements. They need to be able to fill out their application. They need to be able to provide information that might be unique or specific to them as that particular type of applicant. And we want to be able to deliver that, of course, all on Salesforce, all on top of Experience Cloud. So can you show us how are we able to support that? How are we able to provide those kinds of use cases?
Yeah, Lawrence, absolutely. Let me share my screen. So through our Form Builder Rx tool, it allows you to be able to create an applicant portal without the need for development resources. And all of this is done through kind of click and drag or configurations that are updated. Now, what I'm showing here is just, let's say, a typical university page where there might be a button for applying. So this Start Your Future, Apply Now would then route somebody to a registration page. And here I've already started to fill it out to save some time. But typical registration pages, you might see first name, last name, email, and password. But in our registration page, we have some additional fields that we've added. And since we have these additional fields, we can use them to present a better user experience in the portal, because now I can use these answers to control not only the look and feel of the portal, but also the content that they're going to see once they go inside. So I just entered some basic information. This person is a United States citizen. They want an on-campus degree. We want a bachelor's level, and I'm going to go for business administration. So now when I register, I'm going to be brought to my homepage. And in this homepage, there's going to be a bunch of different sections, as well as some branding that I'll talk about, because as we kind of go through the process, you'll see how some of this might change as we change some of our answers, things like that. So every box that you see here is what we call a widget, and every widget has different content. So for example, this application status widget in the top left corner, it's showing us right now our profile is created. So we did step one. As I move through the process and my status changes, you'll start to see those other checkboxes go off every time I come back to the home page itself. And if we look down here, you'll see we have this little YouTube video, any upcoming events that might be coming up. I have this little welcome message in the middle. It says, thank you for creating your profile. Click here to apply now. And then if you notice, we have some branding at the bottom. This one's in the bright red color. Now, if I click into my applicant portal to start it, I'm brought to my actual portal pages. So right now you'll see one page on the left, just my profile. And then I have all my contact and demographic information fields here. Now, a couple of things that I want to just kind of call out. One, you'll notice some of these fields are already populated. So these were answers that I filled out on my registration page that are now brought into the portal. And I have the ability to make changes if I decide, if I change my mind, or I filled out something by mistake. And if you look at the page, you'll notice a couple of like red lines, right? So these are my required fields, which I can control which ones are required, which ones aren't. If you notice here, this country of citizenship, this one here, I can't click in. So this one's read only. So again, this is another configuration that I can make so that if I do not want a field to be editable, I can control that. And then also, you'll notice under here, like military background, I see, are you an active duty or military veteran? If I say yes, then now I'm populated with additional questions. So this goes into dynamic rendering. We can dynamically render fields based off of criteria, so that in this case, if I check off I'm a veteran, then now I have additional fields of information to fill out. So these right here are just some features that Form Builder RX, provides, that again allows you to control it on your own without having to do any sort of coding, and it's all kind of at your fingertips.
So that's great, Mark. So are those examples, I mean, those are the kinds of examples that where when clients ask us, hey, we only want to be able to show this field under this condition, right? So in that case, they're like the military field only being displayed, those additional military fields that are only then being displayed if you had checked that box. And is that how we then can control the same logic that you're showing there? You're saying whether it's showing fields or whether some of those fields, as you were showing above, were like required. We can control that kind of logic on each one of those fields based on those kinds of conditions.
Yeah, and when we get into the how all this works, I'll definitely be able to show you on the back end. Yeah, each field can have its own criteria for read-only, required, render, and we can even auto-populate answers based off of different criteria as well.
Cool, great.
So let's just take, I'm going to move on this for a little bit because right now you noticed if we did have just the My Profile page, if I continue through my app, of course it would help if I.
Okay, so there you're showing us there was another required
That
field.
required field that gave me an error. So now if I save and continue, you'll notice a different page is going to populate. So now I'll have two pages that are going to render. This is now my enrollment information. Again, these were fields that I populated again on my registration page. But if there was, if I changed my mind, I can also, update my values here. So excuse me, this example, let me go ahead and change my level, right? So instead of going for the bachelor's, I'm going to go for the master's. And I'm going to go into, and I'm going to select my term. And yes, I've gone to college before. Now I'm just going to save this page. And I want to demonstrate a couple of things that are going to happen. First, right off the bat, you notice the color change, right? So we went from a red to a green. Reason being, we have different templates that we can render based off of criteria. So I can build out a look and feel branded experience for undergrad, which in this case was red. And we can have a different experience for now graduate, which is green. And I can control basically header, footer information, style based off of those templates. So if the undergraduate program has a different phone number, different email address in the footer, we can have a different footer for the undergrads. And then for the graduate, it's probably a different phone number and a different email address. We can have a graduate, template there with different contact information. Another thing you'll notice now is I have a lot more pages to complete. So the way this portal is set up is once I know my program, my level, my campus are online, now I can display the pages that I want somebody to fill out. And in this instance, now we have academic history, employment history, recommendations. Again, these pages are dynamic. So for an undergrad, for example, they might not have the recommendation page because you don't need recommendations for an undergraduate program. So in that case, we would control through the page configuration on the recommendation page only to display for a graduate program. And we can even get granular to say only for a particular graduate program, not just graduate in general. Maybe there's specific program information that only pertains to one particular program. We can create a page just for that program. And if they selected that program as what they were interested in, then only display that particular page.
So Mark, so you're saying that it's not just the fields on the pages themselves that we can control the logic over, but it's also on the left-hand side, it's the actual pages within the application portal environment itself that we can control. And like there, where it says employment history, so if we did not want to show that to undergraduate applicants as an example, you're saying we could not show that page and we can show a different page, maybe collecting different types of information?
Absolutely. You can create different pages, you can set different criteria, and as long as that field of information you want to use in your criteria has been answered, then you can do that. So that's in this instance where we only had the 2 pages. We wanted to make sure that they filled out their enrollment information because based off that enrollment information, now we can populate the correct amount of pages and the correct pages for that kind of set of criteria based off what they selected. Yeah.
Now, I noticed there you have the academic history as an incomplete page for this applicant, and it looks like recommendation as an incomplete page. So those are common examples of whether it's undergraduate or graduate, in a traditional environment, those are things that colleges and universities are certainly trying to collect. Can you show us how we're able to collect that information? Then how does that actually work? What does that render and show? What does that do?
Yeah, so let me jump over to, we'll take academic history, for example. In this instance here, we're going to collect what colleges and universities that applicant went to. And, some people went to one school and that was it. And other people went to, multiple schools as they transferred around. Now, on this page, and the same functionality is in the portal throughout. It's not just particular to this kind of page. But one of the things I want to point out is how we find these education history records. So, if you had a list of, thousands of schools that somebody could potentially, pick from, you don't want a pick list of thousands of records. So here we have what's called just the type ahead. So instead of doing a pick list, here we can just say, we can start typing a college, and it will automatically kind of pick up an existing record that we have in Salesforce. Now, if we didn't find it, there's the education history not found link, so it allows them to plug in, their own or one that might not be in the system already. But now you can see, again, we selected a program or a school. Now this dynamic rendering, we populate all the information from the school, we ask a series of questions. And another thing we have here is even this upload button. So we allowing students to submit, let's say, an unofficial transcript in this case, where we can put a button on a page, we can configure it so that when they upload now a document, it's going to tie it to their education history record, which is now the Pima Community College, so that now you can start to attach the attachments to the record so that when you open it up on the back end, you can now view the records that's there.
So Mark,
And then, oh, go ahead.
sorry, no, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, and then for individuals who have more than one school, we have this add another button down here so that now you can configure how many add anothers you want somebody to do. You might not want them to submit 9 different education history records if they went to 9 schools and they only went there for like 1 or 2 classes. You might only want them to put in where did they get their degree from, right? And they might have 2 or 3 degrees. But either way, you can configure it so that now I'm doing this add another, and I can add in another. And same thing. And whatever I configure, I can say, I can either cap it and say, I only want 3 max, or I can say, they can do 20 if they want.
So, and Mark, as you pointed out there, I mean, you're saying you're type ahead searching from within the Salesforce database, and then you're selecting a record, in that case, like Rhode Island School of Design. But this is a common question that we get from colleges and universities, where they will ask an applicant about their previous high school or college. And if it was just typed in, if they just type the name of their school, in this case, the person might type RISD, right? Or for the Pima one, they might just type Pima. And so then it becomes a big problem for colleges to be able to report on, show me all my applicants that ever attended RISD, or show me all my applicants that ever attended Pima. So is this how we are able to then ensure that data quality? Is this the way that we're ensuring that the reporting will be accurate on all of the applicants that ever came from Rhode Island School of Design now are being forced to select the proper record from the database?
Yeah, I mean, this helps clear up a lot of data inconsistencies, especially if, people like to abbreviate, or they put in, characters or short abbreviations instead of the spelled out words. What most of our clients do is they'll have a list of all of their high schools and all of their colleges that people have attended. Those will all be loaded into Salesforce as records, whether they're accounts or whether they're organizational institutions, but it pulls from the database. And what's nice about the search feature is even if I typed in road or school of design, I can set my search criteria so that it looks at multiple factors, not just the name. I could use city, state, any other piece of information that I'm collecting, so that I can just type in Rhode Island and it would spit out all the Rhode Island schools. Or if I typed in Illinois, it would spit out all the Illinois schools, or had Illinois, in their address. So it's a great way to do that. And then sometimes you don't have every school, so there is the, education not found. There somebody will type in information, and that gives the internal staff an opportunity to take a look at that, see if it's, I don't want to say legit, but see if that information is correct. And then if it is, they would probably add that to the database so that now it could be a searched item instead of type ahead for the next person who might have attended that school.
So the next applicant that does then go and apply from that school will now see that as a selectable item in the
Yeah.
data. Gotcha.
Yep.
Great. Okay, great. Go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
sure. Now, if I go ahead, I'm going to save this page. And then we'll take a look at the recommendation page, because this is another big one for graduate programs mostly, but other degree types might. Similar to the academic history, we now have the same add another kind of function here with recommenders. So maybe your program requires 2 recommendations, maybe 1 professional, 1 personal, right? We can set that up. Or maybe it's optional. Maybe recommendations aren't technically needed, but you might want them to submit them in case they need to be used to make an admission decision. So you can control whether or not the recommendations are required or not. You can set the number of recommendations even down to the program level. So maybe the business administration program has 2 recommendations, but maybe the nursing program has 1, right? You can configure so that somebody's not forced, you're not forcing everybody to fill out, the minimum amount. And this works, similar too. So if I just do my rec person here, one thing you'll notice is the language. Another part of the functionality that we have is that when somebody fills out a recommendation, we can send that recommender a link that says so-and-so is asking for a recommendation, and you can customize the email however you want. And then it'll have a personalized link for that specific person so that when they click on it, they'll go to a web page. They won't have to create an account or anything like this person did to log into a portal. They'll have a URL that will be personalized to their email address. They'll click on it. They'll see some pre-populated information of who the applicant is, what information was provided for them, and then it would ask a series of questions, including what the recommendations are, even allowing them to upload, let's say, a file instead of maybe filling out like an online kind of matrix type form.
And even that user interface is built through Form Builder RX?
Yeah. So we have, see, other error messages too, because I'm just not doing it right. Yeah. So yeah, the form that the recommender actually gets is also a form builder page as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. So here we see now this person has completed 4 of those pages of the applicant portal. It looked like you could even jump around and skip some if you allow such a thing in this demo environment anyway, right? So that for convenience. And now they've submitted their recommendation here. And this person, you're saying this Rec 1 person, this recommender is receiving an email inviting them to submit a recommendation on behalf of this person through a form that is powered by Form Builder RX and Salesforce.
Correct. And going back to your kind of jumping around, depending on how you set it up, you can set it up so that, yes, people can jump around. But either way, they have to complete all of them. Their system controls in place so that they can't actually submit the app unless there's a checkbox on all their pages. So we filled out a bunch of info. Let me now go back to our home page so that now you can see a little bit of a different setup. So the first thing you might notice is now our application status went from profile created to now our application has started, right? So now we're going to start to, as we go through the process, we'll check off what status we are until hopefully we get down to the decision. If we scroll down, you'll notice we didn't have this application checklist widget when we first logged in because we don't have any doubt you didn't even start the application yet. In this instance, now that we've started to apply, we know our program. Now you can start to see there's some preloaded checklist items that maybe everybody who's in a graduate program would get. But again, it could be program specific, right? The official GRE GMAT score, this might be a requirement item for the graduate program, but it wouldn't be one, let's say, for an undergraduate program. And then if we look down here, now you can actually see my schools that I filled out, my recommender that I added, so that now I can track, I might have been able to upload an unofficial transcript, but I really need my official transcripts to be sent to the school. So now here they can see, okay, I have an official transcript requirement item. now I can go and, request them from my school. Once they get processed by the university and they flip the status on this item, then I'll start to see a check mark. So now I'll know that, okay, they received my official transcripts from Rhode Island. Maybe I'm still missing my PIMA one I can follow up on. And then same with recommendations. This will stay kind of unchecked until my Rec 1 recommender goes through the form, fills it out, and when they do, then this will be checked off as complete.
So I noticed there, so you mentioned when the status changed, we saw that new checklist widget. Those checklist items, as you said, are graduate program, perhaps specific. So you're saying if this person was an undergraduate applicant or they were another type of applicant, maybe an international applicant or something, is that how we are able to control those different requirements for those different types of applicants and display that through that checklist widget?
Yeah, you can have widgets. Well, you can have a checklist widget for different parts of the process even as well. So maybe for the application process, you have these set of items, right? For undergrad, you might have some different forms. Maybe there's a housing form if you're online, but maybe that housing form won't be there if you're on campus, but that housing form might not be there if you selected an online program. There might be parking, decal sticker requests that you might need if you're on campus, but you don't need for online. And then after you go through the application process and you're admitted, there might be a series of post-admit checklist items that you might need before you actually start your classes. So you can even have a different checklist get loaded after somebody's been admitted to say, okay, now that you're admitted, you need to do these 3, 4, 5 things. Maybe it's, your immunization records or whatever the case is. You can have a different checklist get populated at a different stage as well.
Can you show us, so if you scroll up on that checklist widget right there, just within it, so there you're saying that's like the application checklist. Can you show us what you're talking about? So like you're saying if Justin here was to be admitted, things
Yeah.
could change for now Justin the applicant, who now might be Justin the student.
Yep.
Or-
Let me flip
oh,
Justin's status on the back end here, and then I'll refresh the page.
And I think we all understand for the cooking show, we would never allow such a thing in real life if Justin isn't.
Yeah. My
Okay.
decisions are not final. So here we have now, I flipped him to admit. So now he's got a decision. And then now you'll see here, now we have an enrollment checklist. So now there are additional documents that get added that wouldn't necessarily be there if they hadn't been admitted. And to your point, Lawrence, these official transcripts, recommendations, those would all most likely be gone. You would need all those to be submitted before you get admitted, but you get the idea, right? But now we have a new enrollment checklist. Our messaging over here changed. You've been admitted. So now we're offering, additional information. And then even like your other widgets here might change. Now that you're a student, you might post different widgets for different student related content that they might need. It might be program specific content that they might need, links to the bookstore, parking passes, whatever the case is. You have more control to be able to get the content in front of them that they need for that particular status, that particular program, etc.
So, Mark, that was a great overview of what is a common, traditional applicant portal experience. And just in the interest of time, I want to make sure we are talking about the rest of our agenda. So we did mention that we also want to talk about non-traditional programs. And whether it's continuing education, adult learning, dual enrollment types of programs, we also have a lot of colleges and universities who come to us and say they want to deliver an applicant portal experience for those types of programs on top of Salesforce. But there are some nuances, there are some differences in terms of how the actual functionality needs to operate and deliver. Can you describe what those differences and nuances are and how do we support those?
Yeah. Yes. So sometimes we'll think of a non-traditional student. We think of somebody who might need to take 1 or 2 courses. They're not enrolling into a degree program or a certificate program. They need to take, a couple of courses to either complete a degree or maybe for professional development. So filling out a complete application is something that the school doesn't need, nor does maybe the student need to do. So in a situation like that, we have a shopping cart product where you can set up a catalog. And in this case, the catalog could be courses, but it could be anything really. But in this instance, your catalog is just a list of courses that somebody can peruse. This is just, I haven't created an account. I'm not logged in anywhere. This is just a public facing site where now I can kind of go through this catalog. I can find a course that I'm interested in. I can read up on it, be displayed all sorts of information. I can add it to my cart. I can continue shopping and add multiple courses if I want, or I can just view my cart and check out. And then from here, when I go to proceed to payment, now I'm offered two different paths. One, am I an existing applicant or somebody who's done this before? So I might be a repeat buyer coming back maybe the next term to create, to get a new class, or I'm brand new and I would register. And this registration process wouldn't be as nearly as in-depth as filling out a whole portal. But from a university standpoint, you still need to capture, some minimum pieces of information just for the university to keep records on. But might not just be first name, last name, email. It might be address. You might need phone numbers. You might need date of birth. You might need citizenship. But it's not a full-blown application. So you can control how many fields you want them to fill out. And in this instance, they would just register. And then this way they would have an account so that if they come back later, they can just log in and then continue with payment. So it's a
Got
much simpler, much easier kind of experience.
So, I mean, this is then what you're describing there is the ability for an adult learner or that non-traditional program to just browse and shop for different programs, add them to a cart, close the browser, I suppose, and come back later and return to even where they were in that experience. And haven't told us anything about who they are. They haven't told us their first name or last name or anything yet.
Right.
And it's
Yep.
only then when they are checking out that they first even identify who they are and make that payment.
Correct.
So, so Mark, that was interesting, right? I mean, you've shown us that undergraduate and the traditional applicant portal experience, and you showed us the shopping cart or non-traditional portal experience. But to be honest, if you're a college or university and you are looking for an admission system, you're probably going to see that from everybody. Everybody's going to show you that kind of demonstration. So the real emphasis that we talk about at our company is to what extent is the solution composable, right? I mean, our clients want to be able to know when I need to make a change, if I need to add a new field to one of those forms you were just showing me, if I need to add a new page to the application experience, and I want to control the logic that only people applying to the nursing program are even going to ever see it. How do I do that? What skill set's going to be required? Who am I going to be required? Who am I going to have to call? How long is it going to take? Right? These are the big questions. And we certainly know with legacy traditional software, that would have been a major undertaking. There's a lot of legacy software in admissions where unfortunately you might only get 1 month a year to even make those decisions. And if you miss it, you wait 11 more months until the next year before you can even make those changes again. I mean, we've heard those kinds of things before. But of course, we want to be able to say, give me a few minutes, I'll be right back as the director of admissions or as someone on the operations team or somebody who's trained and tasked to be responsible for that, who's not necessarily a software engineer and an IT professional by training. So can you show us what solution composability means and how can higher ed use Salesforce with FormBuilder Rx and Experience Cloud to actually create what you were just showing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I am not a software developer either. And most of our clients are not that use it. And for the most part, that's a good thing for them because you don't need to have a coding background. You don't need any sort of developmental skills. All it really is, access to being an admin to be able to do this, and then some training as far as how to go about it. And then after that, you'll have everything at your fingertips to do, even make changes and push them live on the fly. You don't have to push things from sandbox into production. You don't have to have a big development push to get it live. I can literally go into the live environment on the back end right now, make a change, refresh the page, and it would be an instant update.
Well, that sounds scary, but I know you'll explain. Go ahead,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm going to show you, I'm only going to show about like 3 or 4 different sections here because this is a lot of information, but this is the backend admin panel console for Form Builder. I'll talk about all this as far as the different components, but you'll just see here, I'm highlighted in my applicant portal version 6. I'll talk about versioning in a second. The highlighted tab correlates to the bottom tabs as well. So the first one I want to talk about is Page Builder. So if I click on Page Builder, it's going to bring up all of the pages that make up that portal that we just saw, the My Profile, enrollment information. So these are all the pages that we just saw as a student. Now, some of them, again, aren't necessarily for everybody, but they're all here from an admin standpoint so you can see the big picture. What's also nice is I can clone any page and then go ahead and just make edits in case I don't want to create a brand new page from scratch. But I can also just create a new page. So if there is a different page that I need to add, I can just create it brand new from scratch, or I can clone an existing one and just make some modifications. But if I go into the page, then here's where you're going to see all the different fields that are on the page. And here's where I can also configure all of my settings, making my ones read only, making them rendered, my auto populate.
So if you said that you wanted to add a new field to that first page of the portal, this is what you're saying this is how you would do it?
Yes. So this is my page, right? These are my sections, contact info, demographic info. These are all my fields. The ones in red were my read or my required. Over on the left-hand side, minimize this. These are what we call data sets, which if you're familiar with Salesforce, these are just corresponding to objects. So right now I have fields of information on my page that are associated to the contact object and to the application object. If I was on my ed history page, I would probably have these two plus my education history object. If I was on the recommendation page, I would probably have these two plus my recommendation object. So depending on what fields you need to use, you only need to put the fields in here that you're going to use. And I can do a couple of different things. You'll notice the numbers next to these. These are my fields right now that I've already selected. So if there's 0, then that means it's not on my page yet. So one easy way is I can just click and drag a field and put it on the page. And then from there, I can reorder it. I can put it anywhere.
Okay. So you just put birthday on the screen. And then what happens if we said, well, I only want undergrad to see birthday, and I don't want grad to see birthday?
Well, when I click into the field itself, I have, well, first off, my field label. So it's going to pull the name of the field that is in Salesforce, but maybe I don't want to say birth date. Maybe I want to say date of birth. So this allows you to change the label that the user sees. It doesn't change the actual label in Salesforce. And this setup is similar for almost every field, like almost every field type. So I can select, read only. Right now it's false. I can make it true. So that means it would be true for everybody. Or I can make something conditional. And that's where you can say, I want it based off of something else. So if I go down here to required and I say, I want it to be conditional, I'm given some extra fields. I want this to be conditional only if my citizenship status, and I have a bunch of options, equals US. So now, if I save this page and I was in the portal, it would only be required for people who selected citizenship status equals US. For everybody else, it would be not required.
And Mark, you're saying we can do that conditional logic on the controllers for required, and then you're showing there below for rendered. And
we can do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we can do it for read only. We can do it for required. We can do it for render. And then we can also auto-populate. So if we wanted to auto-populate a value based off of something else, we can auto-populate as well.
So when we have a lot of clients that will ask us, they'll say, we only want to show this field to these types of applicants, and for other types of applicants, it should also be required. Once they're admitted, they shouldn't be able to edit that field anymore. Had previously provided that information from some inquiry form or from some event registration form in some other area, then we might want to pre-populate that data, like maybe their cell phone number, as an example. We might want to pre-populate, but we want them to be able to maybe even still edit it.
Yep.
So you're saying those are all the kinds of controllers that we're able to effectuate here.
Yep, all the controls are right here. As long as you just know your conditions, right, that you want to use, then you can do it all through here, again, without a developer, without changing code or doing anything. All you need to know is just your logic.
And then you were showing us at the top how you could change. Oh, sorry. You were just showing us there quickly how you change the field label. So you're saying you can change the label to anything, irrespective of what the database, what the data model is in Salesforce. That field label on this particular form will display here thusly. But sometimes, people will say they need a help text. So I noticed that you have some of those things. Can you just talk about those?
Yeah, so this instructional help text, if I start putting in information, I'm given another field of where do I want to put this information. So I have the option to put it across the field, which would be on the right side, or above the label, which would be on the left side. So if I say above the field, then it shows over here. If I say below the label, then it will show over here. So I can put kind of pieces of information at different locations. I can even do like this placeholder text. So this right now, it has month, day, year, year. But let's say,
Sure.
let's say the field is only a year date. Like you only need to put in a year. So you can just show examples here. Or a good one is like social security number, where you can give them an example of how you want them to format a social security number, something like that. And then this way they'll see it on the field, but then once they start typing, it goes away.
Or a phone number, I know, is another good one, right?
Phone number is a great one. Yeah.
And then the hover text, what's that?
Oh, the hover text. If I put in some hover text, then next to the field, there'll be a little eye kind of icon that somebody can just hover over, and it would display the field of information. So it doesn't take up as much space as, like, say, the instructional text above or below a field. This is just a little icon next to it that you hover over, and then it'll do a little pop-up and shows the information.
So it's this one place that through this user interface that really that administrator who's trained is able to then go in and set up all of the rules for what they want a particular applicant experience to look like with whatever those conditions might be. Over rendered, required, read-only, auto-populate, help text, field labels, all of that.
Correct.
Right. All right, Mark, I know I'm pulling you in a lot of different ways, so I don't want to distract you.
No,
But
that's fine.
you have a lot of other things there on the screen, so I want to ask you about them. But there were toys there that you had referenced on those forms, as far as like when there were those upload features on those forms and someone was able to upload a document, or when you were showing how they could add another record on a particular form. So those are also very common use cases that we get asked about. Can I just ask you quickly? Like some of those things below, those add another or those upload buttons.
Components.
Yeah, can you talk about those briefly?
Yeah, so these are the components that allow us to do the functionality that I was showing. So the add another component is another one you just click and drag onto the page and configure, so that here I can say how many records, do I want, a minimum number, a maximum number of records. I can, remove or rename the add, the remove, the delete buttons that are part of that section. And then like the maximum record types here, I can say, I want a maximum number, but I can also dynamically pull in or use a field on, let's say, the program record that says this program should only have 4 recommendations versus another program that says 3 recommendations. I can dynamically control how many recommendations somebody might need based off of a program, which, would be a different field. So I can control all of that through, like, let's say this add another section. The buttons, so this one here, like the buttons on the save, continue, like these are buttons, you can add buttons and then configure them to do forward, backward, save, submit, different functionality. We have a list view. So a list view might be a situation where maybe somebody has more than one application, right? So on a page, you might want to list all the applications that somebody has. So you can list out different apps or different items that you configure it for. This matrix, so this is kind of like what we see on a recommendation page, where you have answer from 0 to 5, right? So that you have a dozen fields and they all have the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of answer. You can create a matrix so that all the fields that have the same values can then all flow into a matrix style display. And then the upload, you mentioned that. We can put the upload button into a section and then configure it so that when it uploads, it can match to whatever type of record that at that time you're creating.
So those are all just different components and features and functionality that we know are going to be probably required in an applicant portal experience, and we can add those to forms without having then to write code to develop that kind of functionality. So that's for
Correct. Yep. The two other ones I really just want to talk about, one here is template builder. So when we showed the undergraduate, it was red, the graduate was green, right? These are just templates. So I can create new templates. We have built in 5 different template options that you can just start off with so that you don't have to begin from scratch. And then from there, you can just configure, and I'll show you in a second, you can just tweak some colors, you can add a logo, you can change the font, and then you can just use that. If you wanted to build your own from scratch with HTML code that you have, you could do that. You can create a new template and just build your own. And then this way you don't have anything to really start off with. But you'll see the checkboxes. So these are my checkboxes for this portal that display which ones I'm using. And if I just click into any of them, you'll see I do have header and footer HTML code, right? But here I can update like maybe my phone numbers that's in the header, or in the footer, I can do the email address or the mailing address. So I'm just updating pieces of information. I'm not actually writing the code for it. I'm just updating, a handful of spots. And then down here, I can select my logo, right? So again, I can have a different logo if I wanted to on different kind of templates. And then here we just have a little WYSIWYG where you can update parts of that template, again, without having to code it. So you can come here, make a change. I can save it, go to the live environment, refresh it, see how it looks. Maybe I want to change it again, but it gives you that flexibility. And then if I come down to the bottom, here's where you can see my criteria. So like this one, for example, it's active and it only renders if my academic level is master's. Otherwise, I will get the default template, which was the red one. Otherwise, once my academic level changes to master's, now I see this green one.
So this is great. So you're saying that if a client doesn't necessarily have in-house HTML resources, marketing resources, web development resources, you're saying we have out-of-the-box templates that they can just select their school colors, their school branding, there's even their school font there, and brand the applicant portal experience really to their institution without having to develop their own HTML.
Correct. Yep. Simple and easy.
But if they have their own HTML, they have their own resources, they also could still use that same functionality and just drop their own HTML into the header and the footer.
Yeah, I mean, a handful of schools that I worked with had HTML stuff that they really liked, or it fits, better into their overall brand. So yeah, they might start with a template and then update the header and footer with additional pieces, or they'll just build one from scratch using, just the header footer code.
And then you're saying it's through this functionality. Is this how colleges are able to then control that? Is that the common use case, whether it's undergrad versus grad or by program? Is that how they use these different templates to maybe control that user experience? What are those kinds of examples?
Yeah, I had one client who had a different template for their different schools. So the School of Business, the School of Medicine, the School of Information Technology, all of them had different, contact info for the bottom. All of them had, they wanted different kind of looks and feels to them. So they had, a different template for their different schools. Other cases, more it's, undergrad versus grad, or maybe degrees versus non-degrees, but usually there's one or two different kind of templates that people use.
Gotcha. And then you talked about the different kinds of use cases that people might support. So this technology, Form Builder RX, I mean, I know that we often describe that it can be used for more than just an applicant portal. It can be a student portal, it can be a parent portal, it can be forms as well as just portals. It can be public-facing web forms. But what are the ways, or what's the common ways, as you look at the top there, with you talked about pushing to production and testing and live environments. So what are the different ways that people administer and support that?
Yeah, I don't usually recommend people changing their production environment on the fly. Typically, what we see is if we look at this, if you have a live environment right now, we recommend you clone. So in this instance, you can clone an environment. It'll automatically make it into this kind of like, well, it'll be in an idle mode. Then you can go in, you can make your changes. You can set it to test, which allows you to assign a user to it who then you can log in as, and then you can kind of see it without it actually being live, so to speak. Then when you're ready to set it live, you can just flip the one that's in test to live, and it will take the one that's currently live and just knock it back down to idle. So this way you can't have more than one version of what we call an environment at the same time. And you mentioned different types. So, you can have an applicant portal, you can have a parent portal, and you'll see these are, communities, and some of these are sites. So the communities are your authenticated, logged in, I need to create an account. Now, the recommendation, for example, like I mentioned, this is a site. There's no authentication involved. It's just a public facing site that if somebody has the right access to can get to. But in both cases, the same functionality is there. You can clone it, you can make your changes to your non-live environment, you can test it, and then you can push it live. And this kind of helps without having to go, in the sandbox, do it there first, and then push it to prod. It gives you options. Now, if you're making huge, massive changes that require huge amount of testing, yes, I always recommend do it in the sandbox first. But in some instances, you're changing maybe a couple pages, a couple of things. You might not need to go through that whole process, but you can still do your testing in a non-live environment and then just flip a switch and it's live.
So from a composability perspective, if you could expand that applicant portal one more time for us, please, Mark. So you're saying then from a practical perspective, when it comes to running a institution's admissions department, when the director of admissions says, I need a new field on the applicant portal, if they had to go code that into the sandbox environment and then push that to production with test class coverage and whatnot, you're saying that's probably beyond their skill set.
And it just takes too much time. I mean, it's time consuming. It's especially if you're adding like one or two fields, I like to kind of weigh the impact of that change versus, what might happen if something goes wrong. If you need to make a field required versus not required, right? That could be something that you might want to do just in the live environment. But if it's adding a new field, you're adding render conditions, you're driving them to a different page, that you might want to just make a new version, make your updates in that version, test it, and then the minute you flip it to live, it's live.
So you're saying what we've actually created here is, in addition to the standard Salesforce sandbox and production environments, within the Form Builder tool, we've given our own little mini test and live controllers where that admissions operations person would clone version 6. In this case, they've made version 8. They would make any changes, add a new field to a form in the application, right? Test it. And then you're saying once they're happy and tested it, they can just click that test button and flip that to the live production environment that everyone can actually see. If they've made a terrible mistake, though, Mark, then
You
what would they do?
you can go to your old version and flip that one live and flip it back. So it won't have any of your new changes, but it will get you back to where you started.
Okay, so the portal wouldn't be down, there wouldn't be a disaster. Just make the version 6 live again until you fix whatever you've done wrong in version 8, and then
Yeah.
flip it back to live.
Yeah.
But that's really how we are able to empower those operational folks to control that applicant portal experience here from a practical perspective, still respecting all of the proper best practices of security and governance in Salesforce.
Correct.
Gotcha. All right, awesome. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour. Let me just check for questions quickly here. So we do have a couple of questions. And let me see here. So the one question that I think is worth answering just in the limited time we have is can we support unauthenticated and authenticated experiences? And I know you already did mention that, but since it's up there on your screen, I'll let you answer it quickly.
Yeah, you can create community pages, which are part of your authenticated, and you can create site pages, which are unauthenticated. And then there's even a third, which is called Salesforce platform page, which is internal page that you can create that's only accessible when you're logged into Salesforce. So there's really 3 types of pages that you can support there.
All with Form Builder Rx.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. I do want to make mention quickly in the wrapping up moments that we have our next event February 7th, where we're going to be talking about how to process and review applications. So once these applications are actually completed and submitted, now what happens on the back end, or as they're being completed and submitted, what do our staff see on the back end? How do we process those? Then in the next Wednesday, we're going to be diving deeper into that non-traditional program. We'll talk about how we can configure and create those shopping cart environments. The following week, we're going to be talking about managing events on Salesforce and everything therein. Then we're going to talk about reports and dashboards the week after that. And then, of course, integration between the CRM and the student information system. And finally, we're going to talk about best practices for preparing for the implementation and all of the factors to consider. So please join us for all or one of those. You can register on our website. And with that, we will say thank you. And I know we kept you over. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you. Have a nice day.